12 minutes after 11 is the time. Jonathan is in, I'm going to go for Saint-Gervais-les-Bains.
Spot on. Very good translation.
Crème de menthe. What would you like to say?
Long time listener, but normally on catch up. So first time caller. Funnily enough, it's lucky it's come today because this is sort of I'm a novelist, and I've literally just written my latest novel. Is called Undercountry, and is about the miners' strike substantially. And I would say that this goes right back to then. The irony of Liz Truss cosplaying Thatcher. Is that they're trying to also resurrect the very same battles that Thatcher, and battle's the right word actually, not even because of the Battle of Orgreave, where the miners were routed by the police and literally horrific events went on, but there was a militarisation that went on throughout the whole of the miners' strike, where Thatcher actually called them enemies and extremists and enemies of democracy. A little bit. There's a lot of Brexit parallels. A little bit like the enemies of the people. Yes. That's been recently popularised. Actually, they did the same thing with figures as well. The Thatcher government got all of their compliant media to say that the mines were costing £1,300 million a week. They put that figure everywhere. They didn't quite put it on buses, but they put it very much into the minds of the public in the same way. Whereas, in fact, virtually all of that was already sunk costs and the costs of closing down the mines. And what they spent on policing the strike, on destroying the strike, and what I would say was the first part of crushing union power forever, they spent £8 billion, which, today, couldn't even tell you what that is in today's money, £65 million a week, just on policing it. 14,000 police officers were completely taken off other duties, just paid in cash, paid in overtime, given military training, and yet the press called it Arthur's army, as if it was the miners who were the military force.
And when you say the press, I mean, we are talking here about the period in which Rupert Murdoch began to exert his stranglehold upon British democracy.
Yeah, absolutely. He was a fundamental player in that battle. It was. Sorry.
How do you account? How old are you, Jonathan? Because you sound younger than me.
I'm 48.
Oh, we're more or less the same age.
I don't think I'm much younger.
No, we're more or less the same age.
You wouldn't tell from my accent. My mum's actually from the northeast of England.
Right.
So, I spent a lot of time in County Durham.
During the strike, my old man was covering it. My old man was covering it for the Telegraph. He wrote.
Oh well.
So it was. We're probably slightly more informed than people of our age who didn't have a personal connection to it. But of course, millions of people did have a personal connection. How do you then? And I'll ask you in a moment what the book's about. Although we'll have to be brief because I'm already late for the break. How do you account for the successful persuasion processes that have people cheering the destruction of organisations designed to help them and or their neighbours?
It's a process of othering. It's a process. It is a process of propaganda. It's a process of trying to persuade ordinary working people that these other working people are trying to nick their stuff. Or, as we've got with the train drivers now, as one of your previous callers said, they came up with, during the miners' strike, they came up with this figure of what the best paid miner in the most productive mine in the country after production bonuses in a year where he worked every waking hour and all the overtime he could get might allegedly earn, and then use that as a figure of what
saying Grant Shapps out.
Ordinary miners were getting. Exactly. And obviously that came up with this staggeringly high figure, and ordinary working people were like, well, I'm not getting that driving a bus, so why or ironically probably driving a train back then, or even as a police officer who's getting special crowd control training so that I can crush these people.
Wow. Although they used to, didn't they? They used to wave their overtime in the faces of the miners. And miners by this point were hungry. I mean, families were struggling to eat in some communities, and the police would turn up with their overtime pay packets and wave it in the faces of the striking miners, which was sort of Thatcherism in a nutshell. Briefly, Jonathan, what's the theme of the novel?
So the novel's called Undercountry, and it's kind of literally undercountry in terms of underground.
Yes, I had worked that out, mate. Thank you.
Sorry. But also kind of about underclass, because it starts with the mines, but it actually goes through some of the left behind coastal towns in the UK as well, and then returns back to a pit village in 1998 and looks at the aftermath of, what happened to those communities once Scargill was proved right, because all the mines were shut down and nothing was put in place, and those people were left with nothing. In fact, many of the pit villages were deliberately defunded in the assumption that people would just up sticks and eventually move away. But the miners couldn't, because they were trapped. Most of them used their redundancy money to buy suddenly worthless houses and to pay off their mortgages. But then they couldn't sell those houses on, so they were literally trapped in those communities forever.
I shall look out for it. It's Jonathan Trigell. Is that pronounced correctly?
That's pronounced very well as well. Thank you.
Look at that. You see, so it's, and Undercountry is it's out now. I noticed Boyer was yours as well. I saw that film. I haven't read the book. That was the Andrew Garfield film,
Andrew Garfield,
So you're a bit of a superstar then. You're very modest. You see, if it was me, I'd have come on and started laying out all the awards and giving it large about the movie deals, but you didn't. You just very modestly came on and explained your qualifications for contributing to this conversation, for which I'm very grateful, Jonathan.
Oh, thank you very much. Very great pleasure to be on.
Undercountry by Jonathan Trigell is available now in all good bookshops, and I imagine in mediocre and not very good ones as well.